Welcome to ESI Africa Insights. For this episode, I am speaking with Clyde Mallinson. He's an energy expert in South Africa, but he also looks at Southern Africa. We're going to be talking about load shedding and also community engagement in renewable energy. Welcome, Clyde.
Hi, Nicolette. Lovely to be here again.
So let's start off with understanding what is the difference between load shedding and a blackout. As you know, the Iberian Peninsula recently had a full blackout, and this has never happened in South Africa before. So what is the difference and why is it that we've never had a blackout?
Load shedding is implemented to prevent a blackout. It's as simple as that. So it's safety. It's the last line of defense before a blackout. So if we don't have enough generation to meet our demand, we start asking people we load shed people gradually. Before we load shed, we bring in diesel generators and we switch off smelters and we use all the tricks. And when we're down to no tricks left, we have to start load shedding. And we do that to make sure that we don't have more demand than supply, because when you shed the load, you reduce the load, which then matches your reduced supply. Now, if you don't do that, it would lead to a blackout. It's a technique or a methodology that prevents us going into blackout.
I heard that in the Iberian Peninsula, what happened there is that there was too much renewable energy on the grid and they could not cope with that. Is that even a possibility?
I don't really like, they're doing a big report at the moment. There were a number of factors that happened. It seems that it was very hot in the southern part of Spain. And when it gets hot, the transmission cables aren't able to transmit as much as when it's cooler. So they seem to get an oscillation going. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of bridges in an earthquake or in a heavy wind. The bridge starts swaying and suddenly it seems to get onto an oscillation. And the next thing is it just collapses, the bridge. It's almost as if the grid collapsed because it got into an oscillatory rhythm. So it was probably because there was a high percentage of renewable, but there were also the heat of the actual heat, probably due to climate change, strangely enough. And what happened is some of the big power stations, nuclear and coal, actually tripped out when they saw the oscillation. So the poor old renewables were having to try and carry this load all by themselves, and they couldn't. The interesting thing for me, for the Spanish and Portuguese situation, is how quickly they brought the grid back.
Absolutely.
And they brought the grid back mainly with renewables and storage, little microgrids that could start up, create some energy, enough energy, because those big plants, the coal plants, the nuclear plants, they have what's called a parasitic load. So they need to have things working before they can generate power. There needs to be conveyor belts bringing coal. There needs to be water systems working. And that parasitic load is often as much as 5 to 10% of their power output. And if they haven't got that input, they can't start. So ironically, it was numerous microgrids, mainly running on diesel generators, but also batteries and solar and storage, that were able to start up all over the country and then get sort of jump start, if you like, the big facilities. So within 24 hours, they were up and running again. Absolutely unbelievable.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Looking at the South African energy mix, if we were to experience a blackout, how quickly do you think we could restore?
I think when I've looked at it before, I think Eskom reckons somewhere between 3 to 5 days, but I speak under correction. It'll be quite long because we don't have a lot of storage. We've got our pump storage. And in fact, the Drakensberg, I think it is, they keep it, they never let it go below a certain level because that can always give you what I call the jump start energy. So that one's connected directly to one of the coal plants. So Drakensberg can say, right, I can give power. Now the coal plant can start. The coal plant can make energy to pump water into Ngula. And you would have to start the grid slowly and build it up. And think of the grid as a sort of a living animal almost. And it's had its power removed from it. And you've got to start it up. And you need that jump start. So our black start strategy hovers mainly around our pump storage facilities. which even if there's no power, they can generate power by letting water down.
Right.
But as we get more batteries and renewables, we'll be able to be more like Spain, and we could recover from a black start within 24 hours from a blackout.
I believe that Eskom is already investing in storage and renewable energy, and there's also the IPPs that are bringing renewable energy on board.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about community ownership.
Ah.
I think this is a passion of yours.
Yes. So one of the interesting things at the moment is there's a big queue for people to get onto the transmission grid. You will have heard people complaining they can't connect their big solar farm because they've got to go through a process with Eskom, and they've got to get in a queue, almost like waiting for a train. But the trains are always full, kind of thing. So something that I think a lot of people have picked up on it. If you go behind the meter inside municipalities and connect to the grid behind the meter, you're not in the same queue. You've kind of almost reached your destination, and you can start looking. Now, the problem with building solar in particular behind the meter, unless you do it on rooftop, of course, if you want to do it at quasi-utility scale, it takes a lot of space. But fortunately, there's technologies these days where you pack the solar panels in very close to each other, so you can get double the amount of solar on the same space. And so you build solar and storage inside the meter of a municipality. And most municipalities can supply 60% of their needs by building facilities inside the meter, solar and storage. Now, the best bit is the municipalities will save about 70, 80 cents a kilowatt hour compared to paying Eskom. But I like to look at it differently. I said, why should the municipality save 80 cents? Why not make them only save 60 cents? Let's pay more to the facility that's producing the power. And because we're paying more to it, it becomes more bankable. And the banks then would say, we're more likely to fund this facility because it's getting a higher payment.
Right.
And because it's more fundable, we can actually invite citizens of the town, businesses, citizens, to borrow money from us to fund the facility, because we know that it's going to earn enough money to pay us our money back. And that's what I see as citizen ownership. So the new fleet in South Africa of solar, wind, and storage, in my book, should be 100% owned by the citizens of South Africa, actually owned with what we call a preference share. So they're not responsible for running the facility. They're responsible for collecting the dividends that come from it. And they need to make sure that the dividends that they get, well, it would be the case, are enough to pay back the money they've borrowed to buy those preference shares. And you do that by saying to the municipality, you're going to save a little bit less, but remember, next year Eskom price is going up, so within a year you're going to be saving what you would have saved as well. But the good bit is the facility you're buying from is owned by the people of the town.
Clyde, last I'd like you to comment on whether there's an actual model like that anywhere in the world at the moment.
There's a model I'm working on in South Africa, but I haven't seen anything similar, because there's nowhere that has the space we have. If you go to towns in Switzerland or something and start looking for 5 hectares in amongst the cows, and every little town in South Africa and the big ones have got yonks of space to do this. And we've got the sunshine, and we've got the shortage of electricity, and we've got the problem of non-payment of municipalities. We've got all of those things coming together. There's nowhere in the world that is better suited to make this happen. But there are lots of citizen-owned facilities elsewhere in the world. You'll go to a little town in Denmark, and the people in that town will own a wind turbine. They'll own it, and they'll be buying electricity from their own wind turbine. You'll go to the next little town, and there'll be another wind turbine. So community ownership is not new, but the scale at which I'm looking at it is new. I'm talking about 10 million South Africans owning a chunk of the new fleet and lifting themselves out of energy poverty.
Right. And as you say, South Africa has got the Goldilocks model and system that can actually accommodate that.
Absolutely. And the small little towns, It takes the town off of load shedding. That's just the byproduct. But the small little towns can overbuild their needs and then export into the grid, the country's grid. So the little towns can suddenly become exporters of kilowatt hours instead of just exporters of geel biltong or whatever it is.
So there we have the future.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us in the studio, Clyde, and it's been a very interesting discussion.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Nicolette. Cheers.
And thank you for watching. Tune in to the next episode and have a powerful day.